Can you imagine any other sport catching one of its biggest stars improving his performance with neoton just the day before a final and absolutely nothing happening? This only happens in football, the competitive sport where a syringe in your body and a hematocrit level over 50% is no problem to many people. Yet many of the same people are quick to call Lance Armstrong, Ben Johnson or Maria Sharapova dirty dopers. A hypocrisy which we also see in the figure of one of the worst golden ball players of all time, the Italian Fabio Cannavaro. Do you want to know his story? Without further ado, let the show begin. The 1990s were undoubtedly the years of Italian Serie A domination in football. Foreign stars such as Zinedine Zidane, Juan Sebastian Veron, Rui Costa or Ronaldo led numerous teams in that decade. The same decade in which Dr. Michele Ferrari began to destroy cycling with the Gewis Ballon. Football teams which were more than vitaminized and able to win numerous football and world trophies. One of the main teams of that epocha was the once modest Parma, from the city of the same name, which had great economic potential due to the sponsorship of the Parmalat Dairy Company. The Ennio Tardini Stadium team had grown throughout the decade, but it was not until the 1998-99 season that the team with the yellow and blue stripes decided to raid the bench in two different ways. The first, via checkbook, saw them reinforcing and shoring up a team of absolutely impressive stars. A young Gianluigi Buffon was the goalkeeper, while our protagonist today, Fabio Cannavaro, led a defence that included World Cup winner Thuram and the Argentine Sensini. Aces like Dino Baggio and Juan Sebastian Veron manned the midfield, and in attack, Chiesa, Colombian Fausto Asprilla, and especially the Argentine Hernan Crespo. They formed a fearsome side, a far cry from most European teams. Coach Carlo Ancelotti had been replaced by Alberto Melisani, who knew many secrets from his epocha as coach at Fiorentina a year earlier. But they also had another huge advantage, which the local press picked up on at the time. Parma was one of the first football teams to be clearly doped with EPO in the veins of their burly players. Italian prosecutor Giovanni Spinoza found lists from the team doctor in which the hematocrit levels of different players were measured in July, i.e. in the middle of pre-season, far from the point where they would be at their peak. Many players were above the 50% hematocrit level set by cycling's UCI in those days, when there were still no anti-doping controls to detect EPO. And those who were not, such as Cannavaro himself, were close to 50%, with absolutely shameful levels which looked far from natural. For example, the substitute goalkeeper, Alessandro Nista, reached the levels of Bjarne Riis himself, the popular doped cyclist, with an impressive 63% hematocrit. The team's star rider, Hernan Crespo, also had a hematocrit of 51%, which, to give you an idea, would have meant his expulsion from any cycling or athletics competition in those days. Such quantities of red cells in the blood could only have entered the players' bodies exogenously. But there was no problem. The Italian Federation quickly came to Parma's defence, assuring everyone that all the club's players had not tested positive in anti-doping tests, which was true and normal, considering that EPO was not detected in tests until 3 years later in 2001. According to the Italian football mafia bosses, this miraculous result was caused by a training camp in the Alps at high altitude. Try spending a week at high altitude and see if your hematocrit level rises more than 20 or 30 points, especially to levels that were even dangerous for human health, as was the case with many of these footballers. The team managed to triumph in Italian competitions. First, with a 4th place that qualified Parma for the Champions League, and then especially by winning the very tough Coppa Italia, beating the also impressive Fiorentina of Batistuta and Rui Costa, on goal difference in the final, where Mr. 51% Hernan Crespo played a key role by scoring 2 of the team's goals. However, the Italian side were also having an impressive UEFA Cup run, where they were knocking out opponents in thrashings such as a 4-2 win over Glasgow Rangers, an impressive 7-2 win over Girondins Bordeaux, and a 5-2 win over Atletico Madrid. But the final against Olympique Marseille was still to come, and that was when Cannavaro decided to take out his private video camera and leave us a memento for sporting history. In a hotel in Moscow, the day before the final, Cannavaro filmed himself for 7 minutes in his room with other teammates and several doctors and masseurs. Laughing and gesturing in clear pleasure at the lens, the central defender, nicknamed the Berlin Wall, with his beauty and flowing hair, moaned as the creatine-filled cardiac stimulant Neoton entered his veins, just as the banknotes had entered his youthful bank account. The defender himself claims in his own video that this is the real proof that they are disgusting, and he is not wrong. This substance is not illegal, i.e. Cannavaro was not doping in that video. But the simple fact of mocking while vitaminized with substances that generate the same performance as others that are banned by WADA, and that border on the legal limit, are part of the disgusting show in which Fabio was the main star. And in fact, the footballer himself knew it. If what he is doing is legal, and he has a therapeutic use exemption, allowing him to inject Neoton into his veins whenever he wants, then why did Cannavaro try to stop those images from being disseminated? Apart from being ridiculous, it shows the true reality of football. Il Capitano is recorded with a legal and permitted substance that, as many teammates admitted, they also took, up to their eyebrows, in order to be strong and fast when playing as many games as they had in that campaign. Their opponents in that UEFA Cup final, Olympique Marseille, ended up exhausted, running after the Italians and declaring just how strong Parma had been. Extremely strong, more so than usual. 3-0 was the resounding result in that final, which led to a historic double for the Italian team full of EPO in their veins. A milestone that will always go down in the history of Italian sport. Just days before Marco Pantani's exclusion from the Giro d'Italia for a hematocrit level identical to that of Hernan Crespo a few months earlier. But the best thing is that Cannavaro, many years later, at the tender age of 36, tested positive for doping again. In this case, for cortisone. The footballer quickly came out to say that he was very annoyed by the accusations of doping, and that he had simply been stung by a wasp. And of course he had to take an anti-allergic to avoid anaphylactic shock. The case was obviously dropped and ignored, even though in any other sport and for any other excuse, he would have been severely punished. As you can see, his case fits the form of an Italian-style tragicomedy. A case that shows the audacity of a guy who didn't mind filming himself while his team doctor was pumping performance-enhancing substances into his veins just the day before a major final.